This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. I think most of the battle with being a guitarist is about finding inspiration, and so today I wanted to kind of just do a video encouraging you ways that you can find inspiration if you were stuck in a rut or, wondering, what you could do today, any other day that you might find yourself watching this video. There is some element of truth to the fact that some gear can provide some amount of inspiration, but what I find is that it's generally not exactly a cost-effective way to do stuff. It's sort of a slippery slope, right? And you find yourself then on forums, on eBay, and kind of constantly looking at gear, even on YouTube, looking at gear and thinking, well, maybe that will solve this inspiration deficit that I may have. I don't think that that's a sustainable solution because gear costs money. So yes, to some extent, if your gear is broken, then maybe that's something to look into, but generally it's a little bit of a procrastination thing, or potentially a little bit of a boredom thing, or potentially a gas problem, or maybe you do need occasional bits of gear, but for me, I find that I've spent too much money on gear generally than is reasonable. Anyway, so we'll put that aside for now. So one of the key things about inspiration that I find is that a lot of the time it can be free. And one of the things that I really like to do is, and I've done this for many years, if you go on to SoundCloud, I think it is, yeah, there's, from when I was maybe in my early 20s, there's recordings, covers of tunes. So what I think is a really good way to get inspiration is to mimic the things that you've really enjoyed. And this was a big part of what I would do. So I used to work in a supermarket and I'd be really tired and all this sort of stuff. And I think sometimes when you're tired and all that, it can be difficult to be inspired. And so what I do is kind of then mimic a tune I really liked. So, that introduction was based on the tune Robbers by 1975. I've done this with all sorts of weird tunes. I did the Baywatch theme during lockdown, but trying to find inspiration through a back door where you're kind of just choosing a song that you really like already, that you've heard on the radio. I guess this is kind of the point of listening to music is that the things you hear hopefully inspire you, whether that be bands that you really like. So for me, there's bands like the 1975, there's Camino the band, there's things like Sleep Token. Of course, there's lots of jazz that I really like to listen to as well. But finding these things that can trigger some feeling like, oh, I want to make music today. And then the other benefit of recording these covers is that it gives you a way to learn your way around a digital audio workstation. So I use Reaper, which is basically free for student license and stuff. You can pay for it as well, but there's like this free trial period. I would really encourage people that are looking for inspiration. You know, you're wondering, how do you create backing tracks or how do you record stuff? I think opening the door to the DAW and actually recording music yourself is a pretty good way to start getting inspired. And yeah, by recording covers and, you know, listening to parts, you're training all sorts of skills. So you're training kind of rhythm stuff, you know, you're listening to drum parts. You might be learning how to program drums whilst you're doing it, learning how to play the guitar parts. You might be learning how to play vocal parts on your guitar. There's so much good stuff that is kind of just waiting for you to do it. And it might already be a song that you love as well. So I don't know, maybe you really like Eva Cassidy and you decide, I'm not feeling great today. Maybe I would want to just try and play, I don't know, Fields of Gold or something like that, and work out little bits, and maybe go, right, well, that part there does this, and start to record it. And you can sort of, what I found was I would get quite kind of obsessed and excited by the process, and then you could, in a few hours, for me, have created a cover of a tune. And maybe you do something with it, maybe you never do, but the point is that it gave you something to focus on that day. Another way to find inspiration, I find, is to watch live videos of bands. The negative of kind of Instagram stuff is that I find that that stuff can be a little bit too polished or too excessive in some ways. And you see, like, there might be people that have mimed solos, there might be people that have written solos. There's all sorts of stuff that is maybe it's set to really show them off, and in some ways it can be a little bit what's the word, kind of, if you do too much of it, it can send you into a little bit of a negative space where you don't necessarily want to pick up your guitar unless it works for you. So the things that I would be doing would be looking for something that I can use, again similar to the cover thing, but with the Instagram thing or the YouTube thing, it maybe be like a shorter little snippet. You know, breaking down one particular lick from someone like Charlie Allen, for example, or Matthias Asato, or whoever you really like on Instagram, might give you the inspiration to practice for 30 minutes a day, or, you know, maybe an hour. Maybe even if you take down a lick and then you start exploring it and how you might play it in other places, gives you the inspiration to practice that. And then also that lick might become a new thing for you, might inspire something else. The thing about the YouTube live performances is that you tend to get a bit more of a fair reflection, particularly if it's someone like, I don't know, Paul Gilbert, Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, whoever you're really into, or even singers. You know, for instance, if you watch the 1975 live, you get to see the more human side of performance, is what I like about it, because again, the opposite of that Instagram thing where there's so much perfection on there, whether calculated or whether fabricated, that when you watch a live performance, there's a little bit more of the human element, which makes it feel more like you can do the thing. I think that's what I like about sort of YouTube live videos and watching bands play on YouTube, or watching some of my favourite players play. It's a bit more of a reminder, like, oh, they're not perfect all the time, that sort of thing. Another area that you could explore inspiration-wise, and this is probably best done with gear you already have rather than gear that you're thinking about buying, and this is something I do with the Helix pretty much all the time, is just start something from scratch and start building a tone with something you've already got, but something new. Like you might have pedals that are sat on a shelf you weren't using before, or maybe you could combine pedals in a way that you've never done before and create sounds in that way. I think one of the things that Prince used to do was he'd have something like 5 Boss pedals, and he would put his drum machine through the Boss pedals, and that would be part of his process. You know, he'd just start with a drum beat and that sort of stuff and build up stuff in that way. not entirely dissimilar in some ways to, I guess, what I do each morning, although I'm obviously not Prince. But you sit down and you start to create something, and see what happens. Your inspiration may hopefully take you somewhere. A really key part of being inspired for me includes playing along, not necessarily recording, but with songs that I really like. And this has been a cool thing about kind of Spotify and Bosswaza Airs, is that I can jump downstairs, you know, I might be just looking after the dogs or something, and put on some records that I really like. Patrick Droney was a thing I put on sort of recently, or 1975, or whoever, a band that I just like the sound of, and that it's not maybe not complicated or anything like that. All I'm trying to do is get in the mood where I'm inspired to play guitar. So yeah, playing along with the records that you like, which is a really super obvious thing, and it's probably how you started playing guitar as well. But I think sometimes it's easy to get caught up in this idea that you need to always be progressing or always working towards a goal. But sometimes that's not super easy, and maybe you need to trick yourself into getting inspired to do the thing. So don't always be buying gear. Play along with records you really like. Maybe try and record covers of tunes. That's something that I've done a lot, and it does really hone your skills that will be useful if you ever write your own songs, record your own songs and that sort of stuff anyway. And use YouTube live videos of the stuff that you really like and watch those, so that you get some sense of what that actual human sounds like playing that live, instead of super polished stuff, because I think that can be a little bit disheartening. Those are my kind of 4 tips for getting inspired. Was that 4? I don't know. Let me know your tips for inspiration in the comments if you've got any. I guess also things like TrueFire could help, which again I use in an evening sometimes, and just put on a video and think, right, what does Alan Hines have to say today, or whatever. There's an all-access pass for that sort of thing, but again, that costs money. There are free ways that you can get inspiration as well, and hopefully, you know, to some extent, some people that are putting stuff on YouTube trying to inspire you sometimes achieve it, and oftentimes they'll probably just annoy you. Thank you for stopping by. I'll catch you in another video soon. I was also using the Spank Lead 35 for the kind of lead tone there, and I was using the SY200 for the bass. Oh, that's another thing as well. What I try to do is have no blockages between doing the thing and being able to do the thing. So what that means is that I try and keep my tripods in place for when I'm inspired to actually make a video or whatever, and make sure that your gear is ready for you to use it if you can. I think it does help to have like a space where you can practice or record or whatever it is that you're doing music. I guess man cave or person cave or whatever. I think that does help. And equally, you know, if you've got an acoustic guitar lying around that you could practice ideas on, I think that is a good way to also make sure that if a moment of inspiration comes, you're not distracted then by trying to get set up for it, if that makes sense.